Hello, MSP partners. Thank you so much for joining us live. We have a special guest today, Danny Jenkins from Threatlocker. Now, Danny is the CEO of Threatlocker. We've got some great information for you. We're actually going to be touching on many of your challenges that you're having these days because things are changing as always. And as always, our vendors have to adapt. And of course, you have to adapt. So we're going to be discussing on what your challenges are today and how Threatlocker is going to help you. But first, before we get into that, Danny, hello. Thank you for being here with us today. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you again. How are you?
Danny, and thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. So before we get into those challenges and how Threatlocker is going to help MSPs with them, tell us about your background and how Threatlocker came about.
So I've 20 years in cybersecurity before it was even called cybersecurity. And, I started by creating malware to delete people's work I didn't like at school. And that turned into me stopping malware 20 years later. I've got a big background in corporate enterprise IT security and a little bit on MSP side where it really comes into the recovery. So after I sold my email security company in 2015, 2014, I worked on a lot of cyber breach recoveries, and I came across a lot of MSPs, and a lot of MSPs really at their wits' end, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do because their clients were being crippled by ransomware and there was no solution for them.
Mm-hmm. And obviously you saw a need, and now you're doing it.
Yeah, and that was really it. So in the enterprise world, in the big enterprise world, security tends to be approached slightly different to what a lot of MSPs do. They tend to think of security more as controls and not, I'm going to install a product, I'm going to install an antivirus, I'm going to install an EDR, and hopefully they're going to solve all my problems. What they do is they restrict movement, they restrict access, they restrict programs from running. And it's very, very effective. You don't hear about the Department of Defense getting malware, maybe the US Treasury Department, but not the Department of Defense, because they're very, very strict on those controls. Now, in the MSP world, that's very, very difficult because you tend to have lots of different customers, different sizes, different applications they're running. So it's very hard for you to wake up in the morning and say, you know what, nothing's allowed to run in here unless I've created a policy for it, because that's challenging. But ultimately, that's where you need to get to if you actually have any chance of stopping malware or ransomware or just stupid users doing dumb things.
Right.
So what we did is we came in and said, okay, zero trust is how you solve the problem, but that creates a whole new problem, which is managing zero trust. And we took away 99% of the overhead. So essentially what we did is we created a zero trust solution that learns, it catalogs files, it locks down your system. You learn for a week and then you lock down your system. So it's very, very effective and MSP focused with multi-tenancy and tracking MSPs apps when they update and things like that.
So it definitely helps with their productivity as well when it comes to tracking this malware and making sure that.
Well, and that's it, because at the moment, if you think about the job as an MSP, people often say, well, so what you're saying is I'm going to deploy this, and now every time someone wants to run something new, I'm going to have to permit it. So that looks like I have to do more work. Well, the answer should be no, because what you're going to lose is, of course, you're going to lose any malware, because now you don't have to worry about, is my antivirus. If you're an MSP right now, you're going to sleep saying, oh, is my antivirus going to detect today's threats? And you don't have to worry about that because it's always going to detect it because you're in control. But outside of that, the amount of issues that MSPs have to pick up with when users try and run something that isn't trusted, when users try and install TeamViewer. I mean, we saw the water company in Florida just a few weeks ago where someone connected to the water company's machine and literally poisoned the water using TeamViewer. And this is all things you have to deal with as an MSP. Someone decided they want to use a YouTube video converter, and now they've got pop-ups. Someone decided they want to install a Chrome extension, and now their websites are slow. And these all relate to tickets. So what you do is you get rid of all those tickets. Oh, my C drive ran out of space because I installed my personal Dropbox. Well, no, they didn't do that because they couldn't, because you put the controls in place. And most of the time, they don't even request it. They see YouTube downloader, blocked, request access. No, I'm not going to click on that. I don't want people knowing I'm ripping YouTube videos.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're essentially giving you the control, which allows you to reduce your net ticket. It reduces security alerts because now you don't have as many vulnerable apps out there because people aren't running things that they shouldn't be. And it ultimately lowers your cost of management.
And not just that, besides it being the cost of management and the productivity about it, the end user, the client, is benefiting by not having their staffers click on things that could harm them So if you're preventing that from happening right from the beginning, that's a huge benefit.
Well, and I think that's it. I mean, the reality is, as a small business, there's a real possibility today that you're going to go out of business because of a cyber breach. And every time you turn around, someone's got a different way of bypassing the antivirus, getting into your system. We saw the cameras breached, that company that allowed them to get access to prisons, and Tesla, and see all the cameras and all of these things. And there's a new story in the news, and there's a new way. By operating on a zero trust model, you're not constantly chasing your tail saying, oh, have I got a way to stop the new way? Because you're saying, okay, everything's stopped unless I say yes. And hopefully as an MSP, you're not going to say yes to something that's going to encrypt your files.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what's happening today. We've got some major challenges going on, especially what I've been hearing about with QuickBooks. What have you been noticing with your partners and your clients and their challenges with QuickBooks right now?
Yeah, so there's a huge issue. Well, there's a lot of issues with QuickBooks, but there's a huge issue with QuickBooks data theft as it stands right now. So what attackers are doing is they're sending an email and it's got a link in it, and it will download a file, or it can open a Word document and enable macros. And they're typically targeting the accounting departments. When they open that email, they enable macros. It takes that QuickBooks database and it uploads it to the internet. It literally just posts it onto Google Drive. They don't use any. Well, some of them are using executable malware. Some of them are just using PowerShell commands, like an invoke web request to post the file. So they're essentially bypassing the antivirus because there's no malware involved, and they're literally just stealing the data, and then it disappears, and you never know it's happened. And we've seen it so many times recently get blocked, and we've through our cyber heroes, we've had samples submitted, and we found all of these examples where they're literally just taking it. And I can't imagine how many people this has happened to that don't even know about it, because they're literally just taking a QuickBooks database and uploading it to the web, and they don't encrypt your files, they don't show anything. Then they're taking that data, and you can go on the dark web and you can buy it. I got a QuickBooks database for local dental office. I got a QuickBooks database for local construction company. And attackers will buy that, or the attackers that steal it will use it, and they'll say, okay, I want to, I know that this company pays CharTec this much money, so I'm going to send an email from CharTec telling this company we've changed our bank details for this invoice at this amount. And then they're launching spear phishing campaigns against you and against your customers. And they're very effective because they have all of the data in there. And that's the terrifying thing about this. In many cases, they're not even using malware. They're just weaponizing the tools that are built into Windows. And it's becoming very, very popular, and you don't even know it happened.
That's scary. So, and how does Threatlocker fix that?
Well, I mean, and there's really two ways that we solve this problem. There's two types of threats here. One is when you're taking that malware, and I haven't seen any of the malware get detected yet, but it's literally just 15 lines and it copies it up. We're saying, look, this can't run. It's not on your whitelist. It's not allowed to run. So that's the first way. It's just very effective. The other thing we're doing is saying, look, many cases they're weaponizing applications and they're weaponizing PowerShell, but PowerShell doesn't need access to your QuickBooks share. Nothing needs access to your QuickBooks share except QuickBooks. So you can create ring fencing policies, or you can create storage policies and say, okay, only QuickBooks can access this share. This application can only access these files. So when they do get weaponized, and they do get, I mean, look, applications are always going to be compromised. If you think that that you can solve that problem, good luck. I mean, you should patch them and you should do what you can, but they're always going to be compromised. So when they are compromised, we're essentially saying, great, this is compromised, but it can't get access to your QuickBooks database. So
you're essentially a wall in front of QuickBooks, so nothing can get through this wall to damage that coding, that data.
Yeah, we like to call them ring fences. So we essentially, although a wall sounds a little bit more effective.
I'm just trying to give people a visual. Like I understand the Threatlocker behind of it, but you're basically just in front of that with a lock, and you're like,
the only thing that you get through is what needs to, and then everything else can just go away, and the attacker gets nothing. So it's very effective because you're just saying only QuickBooks can access my QuickBooks database.
Right. Now, another challenge that MSPs are having is ransomware 3.0. Talk to me about that. What does that mean exactly?
So ransomware 1 was really this concept of you do something dumb, you click on something, you open an email, and we're going to encrypt your files, and hopefully we get your backups, and hopefully you pay us. And it started, well, I guess it started 10 years ago, but it became very popular 7 years ago. And every MSP got to see it at least once. And a lot of the time the ransoms were $500 or something pretty small. Then we kind of stepped up to ransomware too, where the attackers are saying, great, I can actually make more money. I'm going to target you. I'm going to spend time. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. Here's a local dental office. Let's figure out what their backup software is, what antivirus they use. We're going to map their network out. We're going to IP scan, and then we're going to actually really make sure we do a good job. And because they were doing a good job, they're able to say, well, you can't get out now, so I'm going to charge you $20,000, $40,000, $100,000 to get your data back. And then now we've got this new one where it says, great, we got all your data, and maybe you got great backups because the MSPs got smarter and said, backup, 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 which is great. But we're going to dump your data on the web if you don't pay us anyway. And there's an MSP, as a customer, you have no choice but to know that. And at very least, I mean, you're saying, okay, I'm not going to pay you, but I still have to disclose to my customers that all the data was compromised. That's
embarrassing.
Yeah, and they're just taking it and uploading it to the web. And if you're in Europe then you have to start dealing with GDPR as well, which gets into big fines. But I mean, fines probably the least of your problems if that happens.
Embarrassment is the least of your problems at that point too.
Yeah, embarrassment. We start looking at GDPR fines. It's like $4 billion when I'm a dental office. It's getting more of this. We're going to take and copy, and then what they're going to do is they're going to use that to keep launching attacks in the future. So they'll use it to launch further attacks. They'll use it to launch attacks against your customers and your partners, because it's much easier to launch an attack against someone if you know who they do business with.
Right.
So getting all that data is incredibly valuable for them, and then they just sell it on the dark web. Even if you do pay them, they say, "Oh, thanks for the credit card numbers. So here it is on."
And then how does Threatlocker solve that challenge?
Well, and that's the nice thing. We're not chasing specific issues. What we're saying is, again, ransomware doesn't need to run in your environment. IP scanners don't need to run in your environment. This application needs to access this. So by saying we don't trust anything, we're not saying, oh, we need to update our code so we can block this latest threat, because we're blocking everything. And when we're making changes to our code, it's to allow something that works in a different way, which is very, very seldom. So you're essentially saying, these are the applications I run and everything else is getting blocked. These are what those applications can do. You put a car in the lane and you want to keep it in that lane. And so when they do get compromised, they can't get out that lane, and it's the damage to your business is limited.
It's definitely an asset to have that. I mean, you definitely want to protect, as an MSP, if I'm thinking as an MSP, I want to protect myself, I want to protect my clients, and I definitely don't want to be caught in that situation where one of them gets compromised because I didn't have something in place that stands in front of any of those threats, that they can't even touch it to begin with.
Yeah, and that's it. And a lot of MSPs are approaching it with this, or antivirus will hopefully detect this. The bottom line is, I mean, I was in Nashville 3 months ago, and there was about 100 MSPs in the room, and I asked them all, how many of you haven't had ransomware in the last year? 2 people put their hand up. And it's a big issue, and they're just the ones that know the threats happened. I mean, there's also things that don't happen, like those QuickBooks data theft and email theft and spear phishing, and my credit card got robbed and my identity's been stolen. You might not know why your identity was stolen, but it's quite possible because someone got your files.
So would you say Threatlocker is a replacement for an antivirus?
No. So, I mean, I kind of like to think of security as 3 angles. Everyone talks about an onion, but whether you're detecting the endpoint or whether you're protecting the network, there's 3 ways you can stop or foil any security threat. The first way is the human level. So if your users don't open things, if they're not stupid, then that takes away. And that we're not involved in that. There's lots of training, and you can train as much as you like. I keep telling my dog to get off the sofa, and he keeps getting back on the sofa. It doesn't matter what I say. And sometimes I feel like training users is like that. Of course, some users respond to it, others don't. The other way you can detect it or stop a threat, foil an attack, is through detection. And we start thinking about things like antivirus, where it's going to detect it, hopefully, and block it. But again, the detection is kind of like me saying who's good and who's bad in the stream. You can't judge that just by looking. It's impossible. And you can look at behavior and you can reduce your risks, but you're just reducing it 90%, which is 10% is a lot when you start thinking about, I'm going to go out of business. And you can also have the post-breach detection, things like threat hunting and EDR and a SOC or an managed SOC or something along those lines. Where we're really sitting is we're saying we're on that right side of the triangle where we're putting controls in place. So when the user opens email, because inevitably they are going to open the email, and and the antivirus doesn't detect it because sometimes it's not going to detect it, and the EDR and the threat hunter, we're saying it doesn't matter because when the user opens email, Threatlocker just blocks that program from running because users shouldn't be opening programs from their email. Office shouldn't be opening programs. So we're just blocking it. Now, you use that in conjunction with your antivirus, and your antivirus is essentially being your backup. It's your check. So if you're an IT guy and you accidentally approve something, you've got the antivirus as that extra layer. But really, it should be an extra layer. It shouldn't be, okay, I trust it because it's not detected by the antivirus. It should be as a backup almost.
Why wouldn't you want to have extra layers anyway of security? One layer is, in my opinion, still not enough. I mean, if you think about it, on the locks of our doors, do we have just one lock on the doorknob? No, we have a deadbolt, and we have another form of security there. And then if you want to go further, then you have your protection behind closed doors, whether it be your dog or your weapon at that point.
And I feel like that's how security is kind of like now. At the moment, though, if you think about securing a house, people have like 3 house alarms, and they have their threat hunting, they have their antivirus, and they're all working in different ways to detect them threats, but they're not locking the front door. I mean, literally, those house alarms are going to make a lot of noise when someone comes in, and maybe they've even got a dog and the dog's going to pull them out of the house. But let's look at the first line of defense. When I go to bed in the evening, if my alarm's not set, it's not the end of the world. My dog's pretty much useless anyway. But I've got to lock my front door. And if you don't lock the door, someone can still walk in and take the TV off the wall. It doesn't matter how many house alarms you have in there. And that's kind of where a lot of companies has ended up with. They bought an antivirus, it failed them. So they said, I need more. So they bought EDR and they bought threat hunting and they bought a next-gen antivirus and a SOC. And these are all extra levels of detection. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have them, but you can have as many as you want. If the front door isn't locked, someone can still walk straight in there. And what we're saying is lock the door and then open it as you need to, and then let the detection deal with the stuff that you've opened.
So you make sure that door is locked.
Yeah, it is one big bolt.
I love it. Now let's talk about the Exchange vulnerability, because that's been a big challenge too with MSPs today.
Yeah, and this is another example of applications being used against you. So Microsoft Exchange had a vulnerability that allowed attackers to essentially bypass the security controls in Exchange, and then from Exchange to do a number of things. One is they could essentially download your mailbox. And in all honesty, that's a vulnerability inside Exchange. There's nothing you can do about that apart from patch Exchange. And that's a big problem. But there's also other things it did was call on PowerShell, use move laterally in your network. And this comes back down to, look, that is a piece of software that you had to run, you chose to run it. Just like SolarWinds was a piece of software that people chose to run, and Office is a piece of software, and all of these have vulnerabilities. But you've got to be able to limit the damage on what they can do. So absolutely, if you haven't patched Exchange, go and patch it now. Like, don't just stop eating your lunch, doing whatever you do, just patch Exchange and make it happen. But outside of that, these 0 days are always going to happen. If you can control applications, if you can ring fence them, if you can stop them doing more than they need to, then you're really going to help with your environment. You're really going to stop that attack spreading. So maybe somebody does get through the front door because Exchange isn't patched, but if they're locked in the hallway, at least they're not getting to the rest of your house. At least they're not getting into your kid's bedroom or into the safe or anything else, because you've really compartmentalized the amount of damage they can do. And they're going to spray paint all over your porch, but guess what? It's a lot less bad than if they get throughout the entire house. That
makes sense. Give me an example of, or give our watchers an example of what your ideal security environment looks like with Threatlocker in place.
My ideal security environment.
Or for the MSP. So, if you went into the MSP and they're like, hey, we want to get your services, so here's what we're working with. And then you see like, well, no, you should still have this and you have that. Tell me what your ideal environment is.
The thing is, there's no such thing as too much security, but there is too much management of security. And that's really important. So I think whenever you're looking at security, the minimum layers you should approach at every entry point is, can we train the user? Can we stop the threat? And if not, can we detect the threat? So the ideal security, if I think about an endpoint, I'm thinking about train the user, make sure they know they shouldn't click on attachments, and test the user. We do that internally. We use a service that sends phishing emails to our staff, and then we identify staff who do stupid things, and then we try and train them. But it's not foolproof, but it's definitely a reduction. So there's the first thing you should be doing. If we're thinking about that's kind of thing, ever seen an MSP's firewall block outbound internet traffic from the servers, which is the most basic thing to do in the world. You should do that. But making sure your engineers are trained, so when they're configuring that as well at the network level, at the Office 365 level, is very, very important. The next thing you want to do is put controls in place. And controls look like application whitelisting, ring fencing, storage controls, things that Threatlocker offers and make really, really easy. But also it looks like dual factor authentication. It looks like proper baseline configurations in Office 365. It looks like stopping people log in from foreign IP addresses. Those are controls. They're absolutes. They're black and white. They're not magic. They're not unknown. So that's, and I almost think that is more important than the next level, although some people would disagree with me. But I suppose that if we say equally important for sake of the argument, is then we start looking at detection. We assume, okay, the user clicked on it, the controls failed us for whatever reason, human error, someone put the wrong control in place. Now we want to look for threat detection. We want to look for post-breach hunting. We want to look for EDR, MDR, and things like that. That's kind of the basics of the security triangle. And technically, it's kind of like a fire. If you can take away one of those three components with the heat, fuel, or oxygen, then the fire is gone. And the same applies to security. If you can stop a user clicking on it, then the breach is gone. If you can stop stop the file from opening through execution, the threat's gone. If you can detect it, it's gone. But if you put all three in place, then at every layer, whether it's the endpoint layer, which is where we're really focused, or whether it's about configuring your network or figuring Office 365, all of these require three approaches: human, control, and then detection. And detection should be, oops, it got too far. That is the last stage.
Right.
And then when we talk about backup, because often people say backup is part of security, backup is, oops, we really messed up. And that's kind of damage control at that point. But of course, you should have good backup in place and off-site backup that cannot be connected to.
There you go. There you have it, guys. That is your ideal security environment. Now, Danny, we have, you talked to me earlier about, before we started, about a discount for CharTec members. What does that look like if they were to sign up with you today and they're a CharTec member?
Yeah, so we have a deal with the CharTec members who sign up. If you sign up your entire stack, and we can do a ramp agreement on that, there's two things we're offering. One is we're offering what we call the free cyber hero onboarding. So if you have 1,000 endpoints and you just don't want to get involved with creating any custom policies that need to be done, what we'll do is we'll get our sales engineers and our engineers to do that for you. And so you can get through that 2 months of onboarding with very, very little effort from yourself. The other thing we're doing is if you do deploy to your entire stack at the moment, throughout the month of March, we're offering that 20% discount as well on whatever bracket you're in. So,
right, that's great, guys. So listen, you're a CharTec member, you get 20% off signing up your entire stack with Danny and Threatlocker. And if you're not a CharTec member, become a CharTec member and get 20% off. It's that simple. No matter what, though, reach out to Danny at Threatlocker. This is a great asset to have. It's an extra layer of security. It blocks all of your viruses in the front from the beginning, right? This is your initial layer, Threatlocker. Then you have your other layers.
Okay, that's great.
But you know what? It's not going to get to those other layers with Threatlocker, right?
Well, that's it. The other layers are, oops, I made a mistake. I'll finish out by saying if you do, Threatlocker has a hosted live and physical event in Orlando where with masks and social distancing at the end of March, Zero Trust World. We're going to be showing you, we've got some hackers coming in. We've got the CISO from JetBlue. We've got ex-NSA people coming in. They're going to be showing you how to hack, and we're going to have real hackers in there teaching you how to hack. If you want to join, you want to sign up for that, you can do that at threatlocker.com/Zero Trust World.
Perfect. And we'll put that link in the comment section, so make sure you look out for it there. It'll be the first comment. And don't forget, we're going to see you at Academy in May, right, Danny?
Yes, I will be there.
We'll be there. So, hey, guys, check it out. Academy is going to be very different this time around. We are doing this one time for this year, as we're giving you keys to our castle. And basically what that means is we're going virtual live into all of our departments within our MSP, so you can see how everything is being ran on an operational basis. And we're going to be diving deep into your operations with your MSP. So a lot of the feedback we've been getting is that operations is a really big deal right now. Culture is a really big deal. Improving staff and MSP culture. So we're going to be having sessions on that. And this time, guys, we're not going to be giving out recordings. We're not recording this academy because we're giving you so much more. You need to be there live. We're only going to have it for 2 days this time, so it's not going to be extended for 3 days. We're going to have a pre-day, so make sure you register. The link is in the post. Register today because after April 15th, we are going to be charging for this academy because of how much we're going to be giving you. So make sure you register now. Danny, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. I will have your links in the post as well so that they can reach out to you or go and see you in Florida. But they can certainly see you here at Academy in May.
Okay, thank you very much, Brandy.